next we're going to talk about what is participatory budgeting. So I know that I've talked to some of you, but just to kind of clarify, as you're talking about this process with other folks, participatory budgeting is a community-led process of democratic decision-making that allows ordinary people to decide how they're going to spend part of a public budget. And so one of the goals, or some of the goals of this process are to help us really kind of measure and identify the needs and priorities of the community. And so some of you, especially those that are coming from different neighborhoods, like you know your priorities and what your needs are much better than I do. I'm at a desk and my job is to get a hold of you to learn what those things are. And so as we're thinking about coming up with a process that allows the community to communicate what their needs are, this allows us to collect data so that we can communicate what your ideas are and things that you would like to see in your community to your council members, to other parts of Metro, so that as we're planning our budgets and making decisions that affect you moving forward, we want to include community more in that process. Not just as we listened to you and we had you in the room, but really shaping what that looks like from the planning of that process through the implementation and even how we evaluate whether or not we're being accountable to you in the ways that we need. So the other piece is that this process also helps us build a healthier relationship with community so that we're able to build our capacity to understand what the needs are and how government processes work, so that you all have the information that you need to build communities that are systemically healthier, that are able to thrive. And we want to make sure that you know how to navigate what the processes and power structures are, build social cohesion, as Councilman Cohn said, within your communities, but also across the communities, and be able to advocate for yourselves beyond this initiative. So how does the participatory budgeting process work? So there are a few steps within the process. The first is the steering committee, in which you'll actually design the process. And so I know Ray mentioned that 70 people is a lot of people. How will you ever get anything done? And so each of these communities, especially, I know District 6 has a lot of different needs in different neighborhoods. So there are going to be different parts of the process and many opportunities for you to take ownership of the pieces that impact your constituents. And so that could be helping out with making sure that people have access to voting, making sure that you're going to all of the different parts of your neighborhood to make sure that they can submit ideas that are meaningful to them. We want to make sure that there are opportunities for the budget delegate process, and so that's really where once those ideas are submitted, that you're able to really kind of hone down and learn, all right, well, given this timeline that we have, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, what can we actually accomplish in this amount of time, and what goes into that? And so this is the part where we're really building the capacity of everyone in the community to learn how they can take dreams and things that they would want to see for their community and make it into a reality. And then we have the voting process, which is once those ideas are developed and we have the ones that we are going to be able to do, of really being able to build those relationships. Because if everyone's just voting on their favorite thing, it's going to push you to stretch a little bit to build relationships, to kind of show why these things are important, because really it's the whole community is deciding what these priorities are together. And then making sure that these, we'll have a group that actually helps to make sure that we get these projects implemented, and learn what those processes are like too, and who are the folks in government that and build those partnerships to learn how those processes work. So an example of how this would work, we used Greensboro, North Carolina as an example. They started their participatory budgeting process with $500,000, and so they were able to reach 1,000 people. And so the 1,000 people that they spoke to generated 675 ideas. And then as they started to look through the ideas, the budget delegates were, what are things that can actually be implemented in the amount of time that we have that fit within whatever the restrictions are. They were able to come up with 75 projects that were viable, and then they worked through those a little bit more and came out with 46. And then they were able to actually fund 26 winning projects because they had that money to spend. And so what happens is the most popular votes get funded first, and then we just keep funding them until they run out of money. So examples of projects that were funded, there are things with parks like shade cloths, water fountains, park benches. Part of what we have, part of the funding that we have allocated, and Asia's going to talk a little bit more about the funding, is that Councilman Cohn and Councilman James have pulled $50,000 out of their capital infrastructure funds. And so that's going to be for things that can be built. So those are going to be things like park benches and water fountains and, making sidewalks more accessible, or just kind of examples. And then the health department has actually allocated from the Mayor's Healthy Hometown Grant $50,000, and we're looking for matching funds so that each district will be able to vote with $100,000 on how that money is spent, because we know that that's going to go a lot farther. So the overall project timeline, so from April through July is, that was us kind of getting ready to really engage you and bring you into the process and make sure that you have the resources that you need to participate meaningfully. So August 1st, July 1st, you'll notice that we actually have the steering committee rulebook training. So that'll be the opportunity that you have to write the rules about the process. And so some of you will be really providing a lot of subject matter expertise on, for example, how do we engage seniors, or how do we engage folks with hearing or movement impairments, and how do we reach neighborhoods that haven't been able to participate at all. And then others will just be, your neighborhoods, who's in your neighborhoods, what some of the preferences are, or the best way to reach. So if you live in Belknap and you've got an email listserv, or you've got, you live in another area that another section of Louisville that doesn't have access to internet, you'll be able to identify what those needs are, because they're not all the same for everyone. And so part of the writing the rules process is you'll be making decisions together about what you all need to be able to participate meaningfully, and really taking ownership of the communities that you represent. So then after our kickoff, we'll announce in August, we'll have once the rule book is written, the steering committee will come together again at the beginning of August just to approve what we send. We're going to send it to a group that's called the Louisville Leadership Team, and so that's the mayor and all of the chiefs. And so if there are questions that they have, we'll bring the rule book back to you and just sort of reconcile anything that we need to, so that you all can have a really healthy working relationship together. And then our first kickoff event and idea collection will happen in the back half of August, after people come back from, to campus and people are back from vacations. So that's when we'll really start getting into neighborhoods and getting ideas of what the folks that live, what our neighbors want to see, build that shared vision together. And so during that time, we'll also be recruiting budget delegates. So those will be the folks who are really learning or helping to vet the projects to make sure that we can do them, and learning how those metro processes work. So that's going to really be the opportunity to build capacity, if you're not familiar with metro, to learn how to advocate for yourself beyond this pilot initiative. And so then we're hoping that our tentative timeline is that voting will happen in January, but we know that there are some weather things that may kind of throw that off. So those are decisions that we'll make with you as the steering committee. And then after the vote happens, we'll have a group that works together to make sure that the projects are funded and make sure that we're implementing that before June 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year. So one of the things that I want you all to think about as we move into this next training that's going to be on the 21st is that you're going to be deciding how often you all meet. And I know that people have been asking me that. And I don't know what your schedules are or what's convenient for you. And we want to create as many flexible options for people to participate as possible. So one idea that we had been tossed around when we spoke with our technical assistant, and Asia will talk a little bit more about that, is possibly meeting quarterly as a general assembly, really just reporting out on activities, and then having work groups for the different areas that we need for idea collection, budget delegates, and these different events and pop-ups, so that we're able, and your role as the steering committee will be, once you write the rules, to make sure that whoever the volunteers are, the team leads, are being accountable in the ways that you have defined through this rule writing process. So then we'll also have opportunities for people to plug in. If the steering committee commitment seems like it might be just a little bit more than what your time constraints are, we have opportunities for volunteers, or if you have constituents that can participate but can't participate all the time, in events and idea collection and voting, and then also for the budget development and then implementation and evaluation parts of this process.